up in the top right-hand corner. There you go, and also on this screen. Hello. Good afternoon now, I think. 12 o'clock, good noon, exactly. Hope everybody's well. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching this live, please say hello, just so I know you're here. If you're watching this on a recording, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoy the session. And if you're watching it live, I hope you enjoy the session too, obviously. Today I am joined by Paola.
Paola?
Say it again.
Paola.
There you go. See, I've already destroyed the live session, but there you go. And we're going to talk about the impact on tech on our well-being. I think we've had quite a lot of interest in this. I've got a fly in the room already. Quite a lot of interest. I think we had like 80 people joining us today. And so obviously I don't expect to get 80 people here right now, but we'll hopefully get a few people saying hello, asking questions. So please do feel free to ask questions. Paola will answer those more than I will, because this is her area of expertise. I'm looking forward to today's session. Partly for me, I have an opinion on tech and the impact, but I probably don't know it as well as Paola does. So I'm very much interested in learning myself, and I hope you guys are too. But to start with, Paola sent me. I'm getting this name wrong so badly. I'm so sorry.
No worries, it's good.
Because I'm dyslexic, I read it as it's spelt, and so I struggle to. I'm sharp now. Anyway, I've got some statistics which I'll read out and show you why we're having this conversation and why it's an important topic. So the interesting ones are 70% of workers feel distracted when at work due to tech. We found that the attention span of human beings now is 8 seconds compared to a fish, which is 9. I think that's getting worse. 6 minutes is the average number of minutes workers take between checking emails and instant messages. 28% of the workday spent reading and answering emails. 84% of email users always have their inbox open. And 40% of workers never get more than 30 minutes straight focused time. And so now, as I say that, I put my phone to the side. And then you have obviously some of the other bits, which maybe might not have so much statistics behind it, but we always have an always on culture causing anxiety, stress, and the things that come with that. But I also think now, because of some of the tech, some social medias, there's this really high rate of comparison culture, which really affects our confidence, affecting young people and old people, which is really affecting our mental health. So really important topic. That's why I think we've got so many people here today to join and listen to us. But to stop me mumbling, please introduce yourself, Paola.
Paola. So thank you for this introduction, Richard. I'm really happy to be here for this chat and conversation with you. So I'm Paola. I'm Italian, but I've been living in the Netherlands and actually in Amsterdam since 4.5 years. And my journey into well-being, let's say, started a really long time ago. So I have a background in finance. I've been working for 8 years, or almost 9, in finance in Italy. So I'm basically an economist by education. And I work as that for 8 years again. And then halfway through my career, I discovered that I was not so much into economics anymore. So it was not it was not what I felt called to. And I was already doing yoga and meditation, and I decided to take the journey a little bit more deeper. So I started taking the teacher training. I started teaching yoga and meditation. And since then, I noticed on myself how yoga and movement in general, but also meditation, was really beneficial for my well-being, both physically, coping to sit for long hours, working at a computer already back then, but also mentally and emotionally. Working in finance can be really challenging. It's high-paced work, a lot of information to deal with. So I was really noticing that starting my day with a couple of moments of centering was really helpful for myself. And then back then, it was like really a long time ago, I was like, why can I bring the two words together? But it was still early. I didn't know what was there for me afterwards. So I kept it in the back of my mind for a long time. And then fast forward, I resigned from my job. I moved to the Netherlands, and I decided that it was time for me to make a big change in my life, both career, like both personally. So I moved here. I completely changed like field, and I devoted myself to studying well-being more like specifically. So I started teaching yoga, meditation, and then when COVID hit, I started working with company in well-being. So I really noticed the need for like developing action to promote well-being, both physically because people were not moving. Like we all know, we see it a lot throughout the days, and also mentally and emotionally. Like people were having really hard time. We all know that by now. And I think that we still have some long ripple effect from the efforts of COVID on our like mental health. But I really noticed how what I was offering could be a benefit for company and for individuals. So back then, it was 2020, I started working with companies developing strategies for their well-being. And it can be like whether yoga practice or like more movement based, because by now we have a lot of science backing up that really moving the body is not only beneficial for the body, but also is very much beneficial like for mental health, for like cognitive abilities. And I think that you're also a big like advocate of moving as well. And it's also helped like processing emotion as well. It's very good like in elaborating what's happening to us from the outside world, but also like on our sensations. So start working with companies, and I came across all sorts of like problems they were dealing with. And actually, I noticed on myself personally, but also on like talking to employees, that a big impact on their well-being was coming from technology. So I started like diving a little bit more, and actually everything started during COVID because I was really noticing how my attention was very fragile. So I was like having a hard time reading books, and I was like, why is it the case? So starting from my also my own interest and my own experience, I started diving a little bit more into it. And I came across how technology, especially nowadays, we're still like technology is so much around us, is having like a big impact on the way we feel and on the way like we perform, but also like behave as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so many points there. Obviously, yeah, I'm a big advocate of moving. It's for me that there's two physical activities which we have to do to stay mentally strong and mentally and physically healthy: sleep and exercise. But let's dive into this technological bit. But actually, before we do that, let me just introduce myself because people know who I am. But I wanted to stop talking for a second or two. Obviously, Director of Employees Health. Employees Health is a work-based wellbeing company. We focus on all different areas of wellbeing to hopefully help you take time away from finding tons of different people, and we can supply that wellbeing strategy for you. The new thing we're doing now is hopefully creating the healthiest, happiest people you've got through a 12-week period of behavior change and mindset changes and education. Anyway, that blurb done. So let's look at the impact of technology. So you said you found through the COVID period, your attention or your abilities and your strengths were beginning to be tested. Can you explain that a bit more? What was you noticing within yourself that tech was, and how was tech affecting you?
Yeah. So I really noticed that everything I think it really started like on my ability to read. I've always been like a big lover of reading, and I was having struggle like focusing on like reading one page. And I was like, what is happening? And I think that looking backwards, a big effort was also coming from stress, because like we know that stress has a big impact on like cognitive ability, memory and learning, and also on like attention. But it was also like curious about like how my always being on, thanks to technology, was like pulling me away from being present and paying attention to what I was doing. And I started noticing how like having computer, like I work on the computer like most of the people I know, having like office work, and I always have like kind of my phone next to me. And I noticed how these mainly for me, it was phone and computer and apps, being like WhatsApp, but also being like Slack, if like in office environment, maybe it's Slack, maybe it's Team, or like their own like communication tools. I noticed how these were grabbing my attention away. So every time I was trying to do something, there was either a notification coming up, a message, something coming from within my mind as well. So it's really interesting to understand how technology plays a role in this. And I think that we're so much like immersed in technology that it's normal for us to have it. But we also want to take a step back and to really notice when technology is enabling us to perform at best. And then, of course, it's supportive. But on the other side, it's also instead like being a source of distraction and then affecting our ability to work at our best. For example, I'm really happy that we have technology so we can like have this conversation now. So that's like a great example of like technology enable, like, for example, learning or conversation or connection. But on the other side, for example, as you mentioned at the beginning, social media can be misunderstood a bit in a way like it connects ourselves.
Mhm.
I always like to make a separation or like clarify it's how we use technology. Most of the time, it's not like technology itself, unless we talk, for example, about like how social media and some platform are designed, and they're designed literally to grab our attention, like to spend as much time as we can on them, on their app, on their like social media platform. But for example, taking technology a little bit more general, I don't want to pass the message that I'm against it. I'm a big favor of it when it's like helping people to connect. For example, I know there are like amazing platform where you can receive, for example, like mental health support from your home, because maybe you then have like services nearby, like you're a bit more isolated. So that's a great way, like technology can connect us in a deep and like meaningful way. But at the same time, some technology, like the use we have it and application we have of it, can be very detrimental, especially for our attention.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously there is clear benefits to social to technology. I'm going to change that word from social media to technology because, as you said, there's platforms where you can go to both get support, education, find out more, expand your network, connect with people, build relationships. All those things are real good positives. They also are there and can be there to create healthy habits. They can be there to set reminders to do things. They can be there as all those different benefits. But along with that, as you said a second ago or a minute ago, is the fact that these apps are created for you to be on these apps. And so for a lot of them, they draw you back. And I find myself continuously having days where I can go to bed and feel like I need to be looking at my phone because I've just got into the habit throughout the day. And it's not every day. And some days, some weeks could be worse than others, but constantly just wanted to check, and it's check. I mean, it's always next to you, isn't it? It's a thing which is portable, so it is always there as something which can cause a distraction or even take your mind away from some of the important stuff. And I find myself doing that quite a bit. And I think when you're lonely or when you got a lot of time, probably when you're in your thoughts most, is when it's there and it's when you need it most, in brackets there, when you feel like you need to be on there, and actually it's creating less connection. It's actually creating more loneliness, more separation from what's important to what you're trying to do and your goals. And so, yeah, I can definitely see how that impacts us.
And I think I was reading a statistics really interested about what you mentioned, because like I was reading that only having the phone on your desk and having a conversation with the person, even if the phone is not ringing, even if you don't get a notification, just the phone being there, it's a distracting thing, because you're always like, oh, maybe I should check it because I get a notification. Maybe I should check it because like somebody might be reaching me. And that can create this connection between the person you are with. So like you're having, I don't know, coffee or lunch with a friend of yours, with family, and that phone can be such a big distraction because like you're pulled away from the conversation just by the phone being there. And I think that also what you mentioned is it's really important to be aware of our habits. And I think that you're also a big like advocate of like creating new healthy habits. And it's also regards with the technology as well. So like, for example, I really noticed for myself that, for example, when I'm tired, I tend to scroll more. So I got that awareness by now. So when I'm really tired, maybe in the evening, I maybe start scrolling, and then after a moment, like, hey, Paola, you're just tired. Like, why don't you put the phone away and just like relax, or maybe like take a walk around, or like read a book, rather than spending time a little bit like useless on the phone. And then I also feel like worse afterwards, because it's not even like recharging, or it's not even rest. So that moment, you're just like feeling it in, because you feel like you need to do something, but it's not productive, and it doesn't give you value, or it doesn't give you like meaning as well.
Yeah, it's so easy just to begin scrolling aimlessly through apps, and that could be any app, right? And we will, majority of the time we do look at social media as that app, right? Social media or media platforms like that are the ones where you do aimlessly scroll, because they're trying to keep you there off of the other platforms. And so there's creating habits to stop that. And I'm not going to say sometimes you're allowed to do that, right? Like sometimes if you've done the things you're trying to achieve, and actually all you want to do is sit in front of the TV and just, like, I mean, so many times I'm sitting there and with TV on as the background thing to the social media, rather than actually social media being the background to the TV, because ultimately we all need rest. But it's about creating a healthier relationship
Environment.
with
I think
that.
I think it's also like, I also watch Netflix, it's not like I'm a perfect human being, but I think it's more like being aware and making a choice. Like, it's about making a choice. I don't know. I watch one episode of my TV series in the evening just to unwind, but that is different from like spending 4 hours like binging on Netflix. You're like scrolling on news, and after 2 hours, you're like, oh my God, where the last 2 hours went, because you're just like scrolling and like moving from one news to the next.
Yeah.
And actually doing that, it was one of the causes why our attention is so fragmented, and why our attention is getting like so thin and thin. And that's why, like, the reason behind the statistics, one of the statistics you mentioned at the beginning of the 8 seconds.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Do you have an iPhone? Other phone brands are available, just so I don't get sued somehow. Yes. That every beginning of every week, I think it's a Sunday or something, they send you the amount of time, the percentage of time you are on, and I don't know if it's on the computer, because I mean, if it's on my computer, then I'm on there most of the time, where I do work on the computer on my MacBook, and that's an Apple as well. Other brands are available, just make sure, because I'm such a big superstar. But it tells you how long you're on there for, and you're like, sometimes it's scary. Like, sometimes this can say to me 6 hours a day. I'm like, what? 6 hours a day I'm on my phone? I'm like, yeah, this needs to change. This isn't a healthy habit. Gabriel, you just asked distractions, and I think actually it's probably a good question to go into now, Paola, is what habits have you put into place to stay away from distractions on social media, or the distraction of social media or technology?
Yeah. So I think what I started to do, like almost 1 year ago, maybe a little bit less, is like when I'm working, I disconnect from all distractions. So for example, like now I have my phone flip around. So it's like flipping around. The best, as I mentioned before, is not having the phone nearby. Because like sometimes it's just a habit of reaching the phone. And most of the times it comes when we're like feeling discomfortable. Maybe we're doing something that is really challenging, and we don't maybe have the answer, or like we're triggered by something or somebody around us. And that phone is something we reach over out of comfort. It's like soothing for us in the short run. So pulling the distraction away is what works for best. Like, as you mentioned before, creating an environment that supports you in having less distraction. So for example, when I know that I need to be really focused and I need to do like deep work, I try to put my phone away. And if I have my tablet, I also try to put the tablet away. If I have like Slack on, I try to close it so I don't have like that blink coming in. And on my computer, I don't have the notification on my email. So I have like the email tab open. That is a habit I have. and I don't have like the notification in the bottom of my screen. So that is what I use. And I need to say something helpful, but I'm not really good at doing, is like not having so many tabs open. I need to say that if I'm honest, I've always pretty much a lot of tabs open, but that is also a source of distraction. So like having 10, 15 tabs open, they're all like kind of an image of your head and all the ideas you have like open into your head. And that can be also a cause of distraction. So my biggest suggestion would be try to create a space where there is less distraction available. Because when the distraction is there or just the phone, that can be like easy to grab. And most of the time it's something that we do so much automatically that we want to become aware of also that pattern, you know? Like it takes also like awareness to see how easily your phone is to grab. Like we have available technology. So as you mentioned, it's always us, it's always with us 24/7. So it's about like making choices about how you use it. And when you use it, you can also like give yourself, I was reading a research and like giving yourself structure in about like doing deep work and then allowing yourself, I don't know, 15 minutes of doing whatever. It can be like research on the internet, it can be like checking your chat, it can be chatting your email, but you have a time frame that you set for it. So it's not like taking forever. It's not like a never ending time. It's a very specific moment you take for yourself.
Yeah, I think they're quite good. I think some of those suggestions, especially the time bit at the end, is a really interesting one. Probably one which probably a lot of people haven't heard. I've got a couple which I think could be quite interesting, and I've heard other people do. So I'm not claiming these for my own, but I can't remember who said this one. I think it's from the Indestructible book.
Yeah, Neil.
Yeah, so Neil, whatever his name is.
Yeah,
this book was
really good.
Really good. And he speaks about, I think it's him who speaks about turning off your apps and deleting the password, or getting your VA or somebody to change your password over the weekends. So then there's like, you don't know what your password is, so you can't enter the app, which I think is a really good one. On top of that, if that's a bit too much, if you think about it, when you're on your phone, and you're going to do a task, you pick your phone up. I'm going to go do a task. I'm going to go quickly check the internet. How many people in that time of picking the phone up to check the internet have gone onto Instagram or social media, or done something else and forgotten what they were meant to be doing? It's so easy to get distracted by being on there. We create habits just to do that. So the harder we make some of these habits, the better. So maybe it is just making sure that you sign out every single time you exit the app. That could be another easy one.
It's like creating a threshold, like creating an obstacle that makes it harder to assess.
Yes.
So it's like and it also takes that moment of like, do I really want to do this? Or it's just a habit. So it's that like barrier that creates a moment of like thinking through, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's it, right? It's just taking a second to think, oh, actually, I'm not meant to be doing this, or I don't want to be doing this. I'm trying to get away from this habit. And put it difficult. Ultimately, it's the same as habit building in general. The easier you make it, the more exciting you make it, the more likely you're going to do it. So the harder you make it, the less interesting you're going to make. You make it, the harder it's going to be to do. The other one is try to create like a moat around your day. And so actually the concept of having your phone outside of your room works quite well for a lot of us. We have me included, I have both an audio up in bed for going to sleep, and also my alarm. And so it's hard to do, but actually I get into bed and I read a book for 45 minutes, half an hour. But the hard part is then waking up and trying not to go on to your phone for the first half an hour. So it's trying to make that kind of create like a moat, because we get affected by negative news so much, and the negative news element of technology really impacts us. I think there's a statistic, and there's a statistic on one of the workshops, but my memory's terrible, that I think if you spend 3 minutes looking at negative news in the morning, it affects your day 8 hours later on, you still feel less, I think like 80% more negative in the afternoon. Just by watching 3 minutes of negative news. So it's really important that we can try to skip that. And unfortunately, our brains are shifted, and most of the things we see are negative, or the things we hold on to and recognize are negative. So it's important that we try to bypass that. And then lastly would be notifications. And on our phones, as we've already said, the brand, on our phones, there is choices to take notifications away. I work on work phone, or work notification, or work focus, because then the only thing I receive, unfortunately, is emails. But then I try to unsubscribe the ones I don't want to see, and I see calendar invites. But then all my notifications from all my chats are all gone. I don't get messages. I don't get anything like that. It's just me, because I run a business. I want to keep up to date and do what I'm doing. I get notifications from my phone. So it's just being proactive on taking that stuff away, I think.
And I think what you mentioned is really important when it comes down to mental health. Like, I think that especially the news we're seeing like nowadays, most of the time are negative, as you mentioned. And even though maybe at the beginning we might not notice it, it's like planting a seed into the back of our mind, and that seed stays there. So if we're constantly bombarded by like negative or like violent news, it's always like affecting our mental health over like a prolonged period of time. And it's also like stressful. It's also stressful for our nervous system to handle. Yeah. So that's why I think I was having a conversation the other day about like morning routine and like setting the habit of like choosing intentionally how you want to start your day. Because for me, I need to admit, sometimes I'm the first one. Like, I wake up in the morning, and because my phone, as you mentioned, it's like next to me, I automatically reach to my phone, and then it's like notification, chat, and the first thing I get into the morning is like requests from people outside. And then it can also be like stressful, if especially if a lot of requests, is like over demanding on your body and on your mind. So like being intentional, like you set the rhythm and you set the intention for the day. Like you decide, it can be like 10 minutes. It can be like you wake up, you have your coffee, and then you start your day with your email, with whatever like your work demands.
Yeah, I think it's also setting that structure. Like when I look back at this, and we always find our weaknesses when we reflect, right? When I reflect on my time, on my relationship with my social media, on technology, sorry, when I reflect on that, it makes a big. It's really obvious to me that it's when I'm by myself is when I'm on it most. So actually, or when I'm unstructured. So if I'm organized and I'm in focus, in flow, or around people, or doing bits and pieces, working, then I'm less likely to be on my phone. But if I'm sitting here by myself without anything to do, or without perceived anything to do, normally working, I should be doing, it's a lot easier for me to pick this up, because I'm lonely, and actually I use this to comfort my loneliness.
Yeah, totally.
And so actually recognizing that, and actually recognizing your feelings, and recognizing actually what else can you do to improve that is, I think, a big key as well.
Yeah, I think that it's really touched like a couple of very good points. Like the first one is like flow. And when I work with companies, I talk a lot about deep work. I don't know if you're familiar with that theory by Cole Newport. And I think he's a big advocate of like carving time for deep work, like for that valuable, meaningful work. And that is very much related to the idea of flow. Mm-hmm. Like when you're in flow, you're like in deep focus, like you're really into the zone of like being completely into whatever you're doing. Like you're challenged by your capabilities in what you're doing. And that gives you also a very nice sensation. Like the sensation associated with that feeling of flow are really positive. And most of the time that goes against the sensation of like you have both physically, but also mentally when you're constantly distracted. So it's like you feel fragmented, you feel like overwhelmed at times because you have so many like requests and demands coming at you from like different places around you. So that's also interesting to understand how you feel in both dimensions. And I think that it's really important to understand that, because you want to connect and do more of what really feels good. Because maybe in the moment, like reaching out for the phone feels good because it takes you off that feeling of discomfort. But if you can reach that deep focus, I can assure you, and I think that you know that, it gives you such a deeper satisfaction. Also in terms of like what you produce, like the best work we can produce in terms of like creativity, innovation, like problem solving comes from like arriving at that point where you're really like deep into what you're doing. Like your best idea doesn't come when you're like doing email, texting to somebody else, taking a phone call, attending a meeting. So that's also why I talk a lot about like multitasking. Like we got into the trap of thinking that multitasking is like the instrument or the tool to be productive. But if you really look deep down, you notice that like if you record productivity when multitasking, it worsen. Like your results get worse instead of like improving.
Yeah.
But we're so like we have this idea deeply rooted that we took it as a habit on us, and it's really hard to like unroot it because it's like so deep into our also like working mode, I think. Like if you're busy, you're doing well, or like if you're doing two things at the same time, you're good. But at the end of the day, if you really look at the results, first, it's not possible because the mind is not like designed to do two things at the same time, especially if they're both like requires cognitive abilities. It cannot happen. And second, this sensation you have, it's also like different.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I completely agree there. I think the multitasking element of cognitive behavior, you can't do two things at once, right? Mentally, you can't do two things at once, and you find yourself being distracted. Even when I run these workshops or these chats, sometimes you see chat commenting in, and then you notice like I've seen some comments come in here, and that takes my mind away from the conversation. So that just shows you how the impact of this. And so I'm going to take this to the business world and understand how we can implement this at work. So if you're a manager or you're a business owner or you're an employee and you're trying to better your business, better yourself, better your potential, what are your suggestions for business owners to do around this?
So the first one is not overwhelm people with meetings. Like I think that especially since COVID, we all experienced like a surge in meetings, but at the same time, not all meetings are meant to be. Maybe you don't need to be in all the meetings you're invited. So be really clear and intentional on when and how you set meetings. So instead of having like 10 meetings in a day that is really like hardcore, maybe be more mindful when you set the purpose of the meeting. And also be more mindful in who you are inviting. And I think that this is a big challenge in companies I work with, because most of the time I talk to people that are like, I cannot focus because I need to be meeting all the time. And then I arrive at the end of the day that I'm dead tired, but I still need to do my work. So try to give like a little bit of like etiquette or like rule about meetings and about the use of communication tools. So for example, I was giving a workshop to a company in Italy, and I was suggesting them to agree on a common rule about how to manage communication internally. Like externally, sometimes you have a little bit less power on, but you can still set boundaries around it. But when it's internal, you can agree with your team that, for example, if it's really urgent, it's a chat, for example. If it's not that urgent, maybe it can be an email. And maybe also state in the email, for example, be clear on what that work needs to be done by. Like gives maybe a deadline. Because otherwise, some people are like, they receive 10 emails. And sometimes it's hard to understand like priority. So also like give your people ideas or like around priorities, like what needs to be done first and then needs your attention right now. And also like allow people to schedule their day in the way that works better for them. Like for example, there are people that work best in the morning and there are people that work best in the afternoon. I know that it's not always possible, but try to give people as much freedom as is possible to play around with their schedule. But I think that the biggest one is like find a common ground when it comes to communication. For a lot of people, like Slack and Teams or like all the communication they have, it's a big distraction. Because I am working with a couple of companies and I see all the messages they send out. So try to understand what can be sent by Slack, and maybe it's an immediate distraction because you have it. And maybe understand what can be sent by email or what can be discussed over, like, I don't know, a meeting. But try to be really clear on that.
Yeah.
And also give people priorities on what they need to focus on, because sometimes you have like 10 things on your plate, and that can also be distracting because you don't know where you like divert your energy into.
Yeah.
So having like a structure of the day, I think it's really important because it gives you flow. Like it puts you in a better position to reach flow, as you mentioned before.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of bits there which I think you've hit the nail on the head quite well with. And I think boundaries, when we look at workplace wellbeing culture, or wellbeing culture, that the always on is a big issue, especially within some different industries. So being able to set boundaries on expectations, but also like setting boundaries on when things are going out. So if you have an urgent communication line, that the boundaries are respected, so there's no communications after a certain time and before a certain time. So expecting that, or respecting that, sorry. Then also, I think, as you said, the flexibility behind way people work. And I think when you understand internal motivation, when you understand internal drive and focus, there's the three elements of what really affects people and makes people tick and to excel. And that's the autonomy, the control over what they do, the meaning and purpose behind what they do as well, along with, what's the third one?
Flexibility.
No, there is one more, and it's gone from the top of my head. I had it a second ago. There's a third, and it'll come back to me in a second. That's going to annoy me now. But then having those three things together gives somebody a real sense of purpose and drive and focus. So being able to control those different elements.
Feedback? Is it feedback?
No, it's something internal. They'll come back to me in a second. It's in one of my workshops. But as I said, my memory is sometimes terrible. So I think that's really important to understand. But I also think the last one is the communication on it as well. So speaking and educating people of how they can use technology best, understanding that this is actually how we can switch these notifications off, maybe give them the tools behind creating a moat around your day, trying to maybe take passwords off, or encouraging people to switch their apps or their work phones or apps off, and maybe even encouraging people to put their phones in different rooms, or when you start meetings, say everybody turn phones off or over on silent. So these communications are always there to help people stay away from being distracted.
Go for it.
No, yeah, I mean, I think I was just mumbling now.
No, I think that the one that you mentioned is really good, like going on a meeting and setting rules for meeting. Like so many times I remember when I was in the bank, we were going in a meeting and people were like chatting on the phone or like writing at the same time and like being pulled away by the purpose of the meeting. So I think that's really clear to have that like line out that like meetings are like for people to be there, to talk to each other, not to be distracted, because otherwise, again, it's a waste of time for everybody in the meeting. Because like if you need to, I don't know, decide or come up with ideas, but then people are getting constantly distracted because like they're chatting or they're replying to email, they're being pulled away from the moment and from the purpose of the meeting. So I think that is a very good one. And I think I was reading about rituals, and there is a ritual of like putting your phone away when you get into meeting. And I was also looking at this one about like,
if you think about it though, when we have an in-person meeting, you're not on your phone whilst listening, talking to somebody. That's just rude, isn't it? But we feel like we can do that whilst on a meeting, on a virtual meeting or a virtual Teams group meeting. Or actually, if you're in a meeting as a group in person, you don't do that. It's not done. You might make some notes. You might make that on a diary or a notepad, or you might make it on a computer, but then it's down to the side. You're involved, and we need to be able to kind of create that within the place we're at or the meetings we have virtually, because the hybrid model is now more and more being utilized, right?
Exactly. So I think it's about like, again, creating new ways of doing things that is more supportive of your final purpose. Yeah. So your final purpose, like, stay connected with yourself and with the people you're working with, but in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is like prompts idea, not in a way that is distracting. And also like being able to do the best work, because like, as we were mentioned before, only when you can like reach that point where you're completely in focus or in the zone or in the flow, you can produce your best ideas. If you're constantly distracted, it's not happening. So I was reading that like some writer, they isolate themselves to go and write their books or like write their like best work, because they need to be in a space where the least number of distraction possible. And they were like in isolated cabin, like no internet. They go really like radical because they know the efforts it has on their mind and also on their ability to like be creative, be inspired as well. So I think that's really like interesting to see how like you can use technology, but at the same time you want to step on purpose away from it intentionally to do your work.
Yeah, for sure. We're coming up to near the end of our chat, Paola. And so I always finish these with the 3 top tips, take home bits of advice you're going to give, or take home messages. And so could you give me your 3 take homes?
Yeah. So the first one, be mindful about your use of technology. So I try to understand what are the triggers for you. So mine can be different from yours. It can be different from our listeners. So try to be really specific and curious. Like if you know that maybe you're pulled to your phone, try not to be harsh with yourself. Like it's something like it's so common to have and to see around, but try to be nice when you notice that maybe you can tweak around some of your habits. So first one, I would say be aware of the reason behind it. So try to understand your triggers and use of technology, and at the same time how you feel. Like, because if you really pay attention, when you use it intentionally, it makes you feel better. But if you're just like wasting your time, you feel like bad. It has an impact on, again, on your mental health, on your confidence. You start comparing yourself with other people. So it's not serving you well. So the first one, I would say that one. The second one, I would say, once you understand your triggers, or once you understand the elements you're more prone to use, try to isolate them. So if it's possible for you, try to find something that works for yourself. Like we share some tips, but I always think that it's best if each and every one of us comes down to something that works for them, given their specific like situation, given their specific place or workplace they have. So try to understand what works for you and how you can apply it on yourself. And the third one would be start small, but start somewhere. Sometimes when we notice that our habits are not, let's say, the best or are not ideal, we start full on, like, oh, I want to change the whole thing. But then it's really hard on us to make such a big step, like from 0 to 100 in like one day. So try small. Try maybe, I don't know, having time like in the morning where your phone is away, and then see how you feel. Because when you get that reward of like creating a new habit, based on that reward, you can create new habits, driving on that force that you achieve something nice for yourself. So start small and notice how you feel about changing that small habit. Don't start full on, because otherwise you might feel defeated if there is no change happening. So maybe it can be start by not watching the phone first thing in the morning, for example, or like start by like putting your phone away in the evening. Like you mentioned, read a book for half an hour before going to bed. And also see in that case how your night's sleep improves. Because as you mentioned, I'm also a big advocate of sleeping and resting. So also notice how the quality of your rest or the quality of your sleep changes if you start implementing these small habits.
Yeah, I think they were good 3 tips. I think the last one of trying to do something kind of small to start with. Don't change the world. You see it, people trying to create habits, and obviously I see this from my personal training backgrounds. People like I drink two bottles of Coke a day, and they go, "Oh, I'm not going to drink any of this anymore." And like all that sugar, all that craving. Actually, it's going to be best just to reduce that down.
Yeah, slowly build a routine that works for you, and then you can always like implement and grow bigger.
Yeah, you can grow from small. You can't grow. Exactly. You can't grow from massive, right?
Exactly. So, for example, like I start running. For example, giving like a sports like example, I start running, but I don't start running 10K. Otherwise, I'm going to be dead tired. I start running a bit and then I rest. And then I train myself to like sustain like a prolonged exercise over like a prolonged amount of time. But I don't start going like, oh, I need to run 10K in 1 week, because it's like also too much expectation and it's not realistic. So you want to be realistic in your expectation and the pressure also you put on yourself.
Yeah. And so then you begin to, when we put that back to technology, it is maybe, it could just be coming off one social media platforms, or it could be coming off or your phone in the evening for 30 minutes before bed, like myself. Or then you begin to grow that, can't you? To build on that habit. I'm just going to go back because I now remember what that third thing
was it?
So it's autonomy, the control over our lives, mastery. So being able to master and focus towards mastery or mastering something, and then purpose and meaning. They're
Yeah.
They're the things that create good motivation and good drive. But thank you, Paola, for joining me today. I think we've had a really good conversation around technology, a bit of a rant here and there on some of it. I feel like we could have gone more in-depth rants about social media. I don't think we really touched on the way it impacts our confidence. But I think hopefully we've given a few tips in how we can manage our time through tech, and how it can implement us, not only our well-being, but also like our work output, both work and performance output, and performance in life as well as work. So hopefully people have found it really interesting. Thanks for joining me. Where can people find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn on my name, Paola Elena Brignoli. And they can also find me on my website, that is brignolipaolayoga.com. And they can see there my work that I do with companies, and they can always reach out to my email, that is brignolipaola@gmail.com.
There you go. Thank you. Also, you can always find me both here on my platform, or at employeeshealth.co.uk.
Thank you so much, Richard, for this opportunity and for this conversation.
No problem. Guys, thank you. Thank you for joining me again. And listeners, thank you for joining, asking the questions, and being active on the chat. I hope we got another one next week with Nuz, talking around what they're doing on GovOps. Probably talk about a little bit of wellbeing strategies, a little bit of wellbeing at schools. So that'd be a really interesting one as well. So please join us again. Otherwise, until then, have a great weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. Make sure you're hydrating yourself the whole time. And we will see you soon.
Bye. Thanks.
Everyone.